Hey everyone, and welcome back. And I'm so excited to welcome back the wonderful Peggy Dean. Hello, Peggy. How are you?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I missed you. It's been a while since we caught up.
It has been. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to see your face.
So what are we going to be learning today, Peggy?
I know that we've jumped into like faux calligraphy styles before, and we've talked about lettering, but for those who have not, we're not going to do it again. We're going to do it differently, but I'm going to obviously show you some fundamentals and foundation of creating a cohesive alphabet, because those rules never change, but I'm going to teach you my rules of them, not official rules of them, because my rules are better, because I know the rules and I know how I learned. And I think that being self-taught gives me the advantage of being able to relay this stuff in a way that's kind of like, it just clicks with our minds a little better, especially since we're working digitally. We don't have a specific way that we have to hold our pens right now. So bonus. That being said, if this is your first time going into lettering, I do recommend going analog, because if you can drive a stick, you can drive anything. So try analog, go digital. Just don't let your digital to analog, if you do that kind of switch, don't let that deter you from then pursuing it in that way, because you're cheating a little bit because of the controls that we have, which we're going to go over. And I'm going to show you how those controls work and how you can use them to your benefit, and then how you just shouldn't use them.
Amazing.
Basically,
and today, are we looking at a little bit of bounce lettering?
Oh, bringing it around, are we? We sure are. Okay, real quick. No, I'm not going to do it. It's a full story. I'm not going to do it right now. Yes, we're going to be doing a little bouncing, as Tom said. So
I like the pause.
As we learn, we have gone over this a little bit. I'm going to breeze through the cohesive alphabet fundamentals. We're not going to like really stick there too long, because we do want to go into the bounce lettering of it. Thanks. I meant to say that, and I just got so into my mode. So it's a bumpy ride then. Yes. But what that means basically is, if you've seen those like modern calligraphic, if you will, modern calligraphy that is really kind of like playful and accessible, especially in the last 5 years on like greeting cards, store windows, even wedding invitations and stuff. It's just like, it's kind of shattering the formal and making it so that we have a lot more play, but still can come across in a kind of elegant-ish way without being taken too seriously, if that makes sense. It's a vibe. And I think that lettering, while you can learn one way, just those little tiny changes that you make in bounce or in spacing, etc., will totally change the vibe of what your words on paper will deliver to somebody. So we're going to go over it, and it's going to be really fun. So anyway, the pack to you won't look like this. This is just because this is how I built it. It's going to be all in one layer. It's going to have this workbook that's going to go over the basics of bounce lettering, but also give you guys individual letters, 2 different ways to practice. And the reason why I want to show you this is because even though it does show you when you open the layers panel, don't look at my layers, because this isn't what you see. You're going to see, T, U, V, whatever. But at the very top, there's going to be a layer that says draw here. And the reason why I do that is so that you don't actually write or draw or whatever on the actual layers, so that you can preserve them. But I would just, if you want to grab those, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to go through this with you on a totally blank grid, so that you're not distracted by this if you don't have it. So grabbing black, the brush pack here is under TPL brush lettering. These are the brushes that you will get, and we will start with just the basic one. If you haven't grabbed it yet, it's under my freebies on my website. The pack is in the chat. So the Pigeon Letters brush pen, and then I'll just adjust the size to what I want it to be. Okay, so I'm going to open a totally blank canvas so that I am not confusing everybody. I will turn on, and I recommend doing this if you haven't yet, to go to Tools, go to Canvas, and go to Drawing Guide. If you haven't used Drawing Guide before, you can edit Drawing Guide. You can change the color of what that looks like so it's less distracting but still works well as a guide. I'm going to stick to a darker blue so you guys see it better. It looks gray, but that's okay. You can change the grid size. So I'm going to go kind of large-ish so I can really show you what I'm doing, but you don't have to do this large. You can change the thickness, blah, blah, blah. You can change this to make it easy for you and then just press done. This drawing guide does not exist as a layer. It's just for you. And if you export and you forget, like if you save whatever you're working on and you forget to turn this off, it's not going to show up. You're fine. This isn't a layer. It's just a guide for you. So when we get into the foundations, you guys have heard me talk about, maybe not, but when you're doing, your letters, as far as keeping the fundamentals in place for cohesive centers, basically what that looks like as a refresher is if I had 4 dots, I want to make sure that I'm only connecting to 3 of them. So my A, what that looks like here really quickly, essentially, it's going from this to this to this, and then going straight back up. This might sound confusing, but I don't want to spend too much time here because I really want to get into bounce. So if you haven't, when we're done, visit my design cuts replay on lettering because it's going to go over all of this to make sure that your alphabet essentially has those frames. Okay, so my point is, anytime there's a connection, I'm not going to go over this too much, you guys, but anytime there's a connection, that's where I want to keep space, because if I'm doing this smaller and my brush size was as big as it should be, let's say I have my A. If the connection was like, let me do it the wrong way on purpose. If it was like this, see how it just gets muddied up? And this keeps it, that space keeps it so that it actually forms well. This is way too thick, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, so let's talk about balance lettering, shall we? I have a couple different ways that I like to go about doing this. So the first one is to pick a word. So if you guys want to put some words in the chat, and preferably, actually, I'm not even going to give you a preferred count because I'll pick one. So put some words in the chat, something that we can practice. And this is going to determine like the way that the letters show up. I'm going to explain it as I walk through it. And this is kind of starting backwards, but I would rather you have a really clear example of how I'm going to put this together so that you can have that thought as you're building your alphabet too. You guys, this is so great. I love it so much. Okay. I like summer because it has a repeating double M. Oh, 2 of you said summer. We're going with summer. And I'm going to come back to these whippersnappers.
I like the Nikki, yeah, whippersnapper. That made me laugh.
Oh, I love it. Okay. So, summer, the way that I'm just going to quickly do this so that you can see the way that I would approach it. So I would have my S, and you guys, the way that I do my letters, you can do them in any way. And that's one of the reasons that the brush practice guide that comes in that pack, you're going to see those 2 different versions of letters. It's because I really want to emphasize that you don't have to do, a cursive S. You don't have to do a regular S that goes into whatever. It's however you want to do it, as long as it's cohesive. So I'm going to go with just like a regular S like this. And my brush is pretty small. And the reason why is because I like the way that it looks with a really nice hairline stroke and then pressure. If you guys aren't familiar with the pressure, this is just something that's going to take some getting used to. But the way that you know where you want your pressure to go or your weight lines to go is just think about where the downstroke is. So if you have to do this like pretty slowly, that's totally okay. So like a U would be, this is a downstroke and then an upstroke and then a downstroke and upstroke. as we segue, as I'm giving you this point, this is a good opportunity for me to tell you the power of digital lettering versus analog. The slower you go, the more, see how you can shake? Yep. So I'm going to tell you a trick, and I don't want you to get too used to this, but with brushes in Procreate, if you click on the brush, you're going to see something called Streamline under the stroke path. That's going to be the first screen you see. If you turn up Streamline, I have mine set around 31-ish% because that's according to the speed that I letter. It allows me to still have a little bit of hand drawn quality, but takes away like the massive like waviness. But if you need to go real slow, shoot it up to 60-ish, and then I'll show you when I go that same speed, it's like a little magnet. So if you see the trace, it's like it kind of magnets to it. If you go up to 100, first of all, please don't. Just don't. It's like I will judge you.
Doesn't look nice either.
What?
It doesn't look nice.
It just is so fake. I just don't like it. But Streamline does have a huge advantage though. I'm going back to like 30-ish because I'm pretty quick. I'm going to try not to be for this, but the reason why I go a little bit faster is because this is actually a trick that I learned because I learned analog first. So you guys, a trick for those wobbly lines is, let's say I have my U. If I come down, do you see how I flick my wrist? This upstroke is not something I drag up, even though that one looks really good. Compliments to me. I did a really good job on that. But it's like when you try to show like what you normally do that's always terrible, and it's the one time that you do it well. You know? It's usually the opposite. Like you totally anyway. So what I do is after I drag down, I just take my hand and use my wrist to guide in a quick way. And this is just something I started getting used to. And that's why if you've seen or familiarized yourself with my lettering, you'll see that my exit strokes, which are these things, are up and over. It's a stylistic thing for sure, but a lot of people's look, like this. But the reason mine don't is because I am flicking my wrist up. So it's kind of like, sure, that's totally my style, when really it's totally a cheat. So I just wanted to give you guys that little note. Okay, so we're doing summer. Here's what I'm going to do. Not only am I going to bounce my letters, but here's the biggest cheat that I did not realize until I tried it, because it's like you're always experimenting. I tried it and I was like, oh my gosh, I just cracked the code to bounce lettering. Make your vowels smaller. Okay, so there's my M. My M, I'm going into my M. There's my U, and then my M is going to go back to the main space. So here's my X height, here's my baseline, and then my M, and then I can bounce that. And it looks weird right now, so let me do the full word, and then here's my E, small. Small and cute, and then my R comes down. So if I make that smaller, look at how pretty, right? I guess my S should come and be a little bit more emphasized.
It feels much more dynamic though with that tiny little E.
If I did the same thing with regular size vowels, would be totally fine, but here's the difference with the lack of personality, I guess. We're going to go over these letters and why I chose to do it that way, but you see the difference? They're the exact same. It's just the vowel size. Okay, so awesome.
Is that a known technique, or is that your kind of?
I don't think so. I mean, I've never heard it as like a thing, so I probably did not invent this concept, but I'm gonna take the credit for it because, again, self-taught. All of these things are things I spent way too long experimenting on. So if you've tried bounce lettering, it doesn't look quite right, or it doesn't give the effect that you actually want it to look like. Try just making your vowels smaller. Don't worry about them reaching, your main baseline. Don't worry about X height. Don't worry about bouncing them below or above. Just like make them smaller. Yeah, right? I know, mind blown. It's these little gems. If you came here for any reason other than this today, I mean, you're free to go. Please don't go.
Don't leave us.
Okay, so we'll go through the alphabet and I'll explain to you how and why I choose to do what it is. Real quick, if you guys, you might have your guidelines. I'm just going to really quickly just do a snap line. So if you drag and hold, it'll snap in place. I'm going to do 2 of those just so I can give you a better visual of, okay, here's my X height, here's my baseline. And all that means is this is where all of my letters sit. And then the X height is basically where the top of my lowercase letters meet at the top. And this is what we're going to bounce away from. Some of you are asking what's bouncing. So it's essentially, what's a short word that you guys gave me? I'm not going to scroll up. Put words just randomly in here, just randomly if you think of them, and I'll look at them. But I'll just use the word, man, this is why I should.
All I can think is whippersnapper still.
What?
All I can think is whippersnapper. Love. Norris says.
Love's perfect because it's small. Okay, short. I mean, so if I was to do, the word love, and I didn't, oh boy, and I didn't bounce it, it would look something like this. But if I bounced it, it would look like this. So that's basically the difference. Sorry, guys. This is like, for some reason, really wobbly. But yeah,
it seems appropriate for the bounce.
Huh?
It seems appropriate for the bounce theme of this session.
Oh, it does. Oh my gosh. It does. I thought I was like, yeah, sure. Gosh, yeah, theme today. It's really working well. So that's the difference with bounce lettering versus like traditional cohesive lettering. And that's kind of, you learn the rules, which I really want you guys to do. I'm just going to keep circling this until it's in your heads. So watch my previous session with Tom. It's really entertaining too, on lettering. Okay, I'll stop. Learn the rules to break the rules. Okay. So, oops, I don't want to do all that. All right. So knowing that, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create our first letter. We might not get through, and we're not going to get through the entire alphabet. I'm not going to bore you with that. But we will do A. So I have my A in here. I'm going to go my speed so that I don't mess it up. Okay. So I have my A. And then the way I can change that is I can either, a little rule of thumb is to continue returning to your baseline, no matter what. So if you're writing a word, just make sure you continue coming to your baseline as far as where your main part of your letter sits, because otherwise your bounce lettering is going to look, it's not going to look right, So you want the bounce to make sense. So continue going to baseline. How you pick and choose to do that is up to you. We're going to go through a ton of words, but that's what I want to say. So when I say that, it applies here. So if I wanted to bounce my A, I could. If I wanted to bring my A a little bit higher than the baseline, I could. This will return to baseline. That's a good anchor point for my bounce lettering. There might be some people who might disagree with the way that I think about this, but this is what's been helping me and I'm successful. So you can be too. I like to break all the rules. So, okay. So that's your, A, and then let's go to C. C is one of those ones that you can either keep at the X height and baseline, or you can drop it. It looks really pretty when you drop it. It just depends, nice. Is this going to work? Does it make sense? And I don't drop things too far below unless you're going really elaborate with like flourishes or swashes. I find it to actually get a little more confusing and look a little bit more uncontrolled, if you will, kind of like that love that I just wrote. Let's go to G. So G. Okay, this is actually a good example. So G usually looks something like this. Just a quick tip back to like beginner fundamentals. when you're doing like G and H, let's go H. When you do these types of letters, you have a descending stem loop and an ascending stem loop. You want to make sure that the width, it doesn't have to be perfect, but is approximately the same unless it's a flourish, and that the approximate height is the same. This is just a trick for like consistency in your alphabet, because if you did like a G like this and then your H looked like this, it's still pretty.
It feels like a bit more clumsy maybe than
it just looks unpolished. Like here's a better example, because these both drop below. It just, that looks, then you're going into like handwriting cursive-y instead of drawing your letters and making sure that they, like, this is longer, but it doesn't matter. Overall, they look more cohesive. So yeah, so if I'm doing my G, okay, that was just a random side note. We're going back now. G would be a fun one to also bring up off the baseline and make smaller. I do this a lot because my name is Peggy and I have repeating G's. So I kind of will come in and do something like this so that, you know, I have a focus here, but then it's meeting baseline again. It's just a fun little thing. So this is kind of how I pick and choose. Most of the time, though, I have like my ascending stem loop hit the baseline and then have whatever comes next come off of it. So it reaches up to my X height and then drops below the baseline. I hope that makes sense. Now let's see another letter. M is one of my favorites to bounce because I keep everything X height baseline until I get to the second overturn. And you could bring it all the way up and then drop, but what's even more fun is if you bounce right here, so bring that down lower and then bring the exit stroke coming, you know, from dropping below the baseline. W is a fun one also. This one is like, W is like one of my worst enemies because for some reason I never know how I want to form it, but I usually do something like this. A lot of people, wow. Okay, there we go. A lot of people will, you know, have one of these guys coming off of it, but you could also come down. You just want to make sure that it still looks like a W. But bouncing the second part of a letter is really fun. So that's why M and W are really fun. Let's go into T. So
Peggy, I'm guessing as well, as with any composition, it's kind of dependent on the context and the brief.
It totally does.
Which is why you want to go, right? Like,
which is why we're going to do a lot more.
Or something wild.
Huh?
It could be a subtle bounce or something like really wild and out there, depending on the project.
Yeah. But we're gonna do all these words that are fun to kind of show how that will show up in your full word, and like I'll walk you through kind of like my thought process behind it so that you can pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't. But typically, unless it's a vowel or you know, like a G that's going to have an anchoring descending stem loop, unless it has something like that, I typically always come to the baseline or below. I don't float above it. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made in lettering when I first started, and I didn't understand this concept, or I didn't make it up in my mind, or whatever it was yet. And that's why, you know, if I do thing, it looked really wrong because it didn't have, is it bounce lettering? Sure. But is it the same as if I had an anchor point? No. So if I do the word thing, I am bringing my I up and my G because it has an anchor point. But what you'll see that's consistent is that I have this part, and these meeting the baseline. So the reason why I didn't drop my N is because I knew my G was coming. And if I dropped my N, I was going to have some interference. That's something that you learn over time. But my biggest thing for the thing is to always have an anchor point on your baseline. And then anything else, have it come down versus up. Okay, just
Mhm.
little tricks. Okay, so let's go into some words and we'll see how these come up. Oh, real quick though, before we do that, I want to do repeating letters. Repeating letters are a perfect opportunity to bounce because you may not, usually bounce an A, but then because you have it repeating, okay, I'm going to break my own rule real quick, but it's because it's a vowel. You can have it bounce like this. A isn't one that repeats a lot of times though, but like T, I love to bounce like this and then bring, my cross hatch guy there. What's another one? M. I like to do M's just the way that I bounce them. And it's because they already have so much personality happening in the letter that it looks really cool when it does its repeat also. And then let's see, what's another common? O's are one. And a lot of times I'll just do my O's like this, but if you do decide to make your vowels smaller, I like to kind of have O's bounce like that. So if it was like, broom. Okay, that's not the right spacing, but you get the point. It just looks really pretty.
Mhm.
Okay. Double S, great question. S's are weird because you might do your S's like this. You might do your S's like this. There's no wrong or right way to choose which S you want to do. But if I was to do this S repeating, I like to have this part, this downstroke, drop below. That's just a stylistic thing that I started doing as I was practicing more. But you could also have it come out like this. You could also, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that. It doesn't have to drop below baseline. But repeating S's, I often will do something like that since I have them drop anyway. So just a quick reminder here. These are not anchored, but they are both dropping below. Even though it's coming up higher, they're both dropping below. That has helped me so much to remember to do. The only ones, again, that are not dropping below are vowels, sometimes repeating letters.
And that's like a pretty hard rule, yeah?
Huh?
That's quite a hard rule then with the vowels.
I don't think so when you put it into practice. So let's see. I'm just going to pick a word that you guys didn't necessarily choose, but is in here. Kiwi is fun. So if I did kiwi, I have my baseline that I met. Okay. I'm going to do my normal K. I'm not going crazy. I'm not making it super fast. This is my structural K. And then I'm going to make my I smaller. And then I'm going to bounce my W, but I'm going to keep it on the baseline and then just come below, and then I'll have a little exit stroke here and then a smaller I. Okay, so here it is really structured. I have my baseline anchor, I come below on my bounce, and my vowels are smaller. Those are like my go-to rules. So it's still the structure. You see the structure maintained through the word, but those are the main things.
Can I request a word?
I would love that.
Guru.
Guru.
You're a lettering guru.
Oh my gosh, compliments. Compliment Thursday. Guru. Okay, so I'm going to do this two different ways. I'm going to do it in the structural where I'm not taking away from like my normal G. Okay, so I have my structural G. Got that? And then I'm going to shrink my U, my little trick. Okay. Because I have in my mind my U that I usually do if it is normal. Whoops. And what I mean by normal is the normal size. I drop my last stroke, so I'm going to do that. So that's why that happens. And then I'm going to go into my R, and R, it could live just right here and then be smaller here, okay? But I'm going to give you another option. Let's say you like your R's to come down like this and come through here. That's fine. Same size, baseline anchor, and then my U, okay? I know that R is weird. It took me a long time to appreciate it in lettering. When people would do it, I thought it was kind of meh, but now I love it. So you just never know. Cool. I know. But then one of my favorite R's, whoops.
Oh, I got a good question from Amy. For a second. Sorry. Please finish with the R, and then I got a good question from Amy.
Sure. you can do it in 2 strokes. You know, if you do something like this, if I just brought it here and then I came through like this, but if you can get used to doing this type of R in 1 stroke from the previous letter, just know that's what you're about to go into. You could bring that way up and then go smaller like this.
Nice.
And then the last version I'm going to do, oh, I guess I'm on the same. I'll just go back, is if I wanted to make the small, you know, make that part of the G smaller. And then that's how. So let me explain this again. I went higher off my baseline only because I knew that I was dropping below anyway. My vowel is smaller, my vowel is smaller, and then my R is anchored, but it reaches outside the X height. There are complications to this, but main rules are in play here. Okay, what's the question?
Amy says, what about if you're bouncing letters on a curve instead of a straight line?
Okay.
It's a good question.
I don't like this, but I'm going to talk about it. Why you want to make things so challenging for everybody? And by everybody, I mean me. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's do a curve, shall we? Shall we? All right, I'm going to make my little curve. It looks so good. Oops. That is a good question. Thanks for asking. Actually, I'm going to do one that's less steep. So there we go. If you're doing that,
Amy said, sorry, Peggy.
No,
it's a great question.
act like it's way out of, no, it's fine, you guys. This is actually a really great question. And you guys, I promise it's totally fine, Amy. This is a great question. And
no one likes to bully, Peggy.
I know. The reason why this can be tricky, though, and the reason why it is a really good question is because when you're doing curves, it distorts a little bit. So like if I'm doing, wow, I can do things the same. If I was doing like a normal, you know, lettering situation where I'm like doing magic, this is going to be so off, but you're going to get the point. In order to keep it along the curve, this is bigger than this. And so like, we don't want to distort our lettering when we're doing bounce lettering, brush lettering, whatever. So I keep that in mind, and I would usually just kind of apply the same rules, but definitely have a guide. And if you don't want, you know, if you're in Procreate, it's easy because you can just make a new layer on top and then call it good. But if you're doing analog, you would want to use like a light box or just like, I guess, a thinner piece of paper with like a Sharpie underneath so that you have a guide. But as long as you're working with guides, you're so good and you can do anything that you want to do. Like you can letter, I'll show you one inside a shape after this. But I would do the same thing. So for some reason, I can't get trinket out of my head. I don't know if one of you guys said it or what. But so I'm going to come down just the same way I did. Okay, wait, I'm going to draw an X height in here because in my mind, it exists right there. Okay, so trinket, I'm going to bring like, let me make this look prettier, okay? All right, so I bring down like this. I have where, actually, let's bounce it. There. It comes below. The cap height, you guys, just for those who aren't familiar with these terms, and I go over it in my previous session, but the cap height is basically, that means where the top of capital letters are. And typically in lettering, your like L's and things like that will reach just slightly higher than a cap height. Even if you're not bouncing, it's just kind of a thing. And you don't have to know that rule. It's not a big deal. You can go to the cabinet and whatever you want to do. But it's something that I like to practice doing. So then I'm going to do this R that has, you know, warmed my heart, and I keep it anchored at baseline. I'm going to make my vowel a little smaller, which might start setting us up for failure, but it's not going to. Why? Because we know the rules in order to break the rules. And so then my N is meeting the baseline. I'll bounce it. Whoops, that's there. So basically what I'm doing instead of, here, I'll put this in so it's easier to see the word. What I'm doing instead of, so you saw me do that initially where I stretched it and came back in. We don't want to do that. So really what I'm doing is I'm kind of isolating each letter as if it's straight on the line. So I'm just picturing it
that
like
makes sense.
this. Yeah. So that's why rotating is so helpful in Procreate, because you can then visualize it as if, okay, this is the only way the word is going. This is all I have to think about. And then I can make my E smaller and then drop my T. And then I can turn my million layers off. And then I have, lettering on a curve, if that makes sense. Bounce lettering is trickier on a curve. So if you are doing like a circle, it would make more sense because it would come together that way. But if you don't have the baseline to show what it is, I recommend not bouncing a ton, because otherwise it kind of gets lost, if that makes sense. So ideally, maybe I would have brought my T right here instead. So I'm going to do a really good job cleaning that up. And then right here instead, really good job cleaning that up. Make my bounce here. So that it's just a little bit easier to comprehend that that's the curve, if that makes sense. Yeah? Cool. Really good question. So I'll show you another version of like what this could look like. Why is that not working? Stop it. There. Okay, I'll show you another version of what this could look like inside an actual shape. So let's say you want to do lettering inside. I'll do a wide heart. And you want to do 2 lines. So I'll go with Amy plus Donna, because those are the 2 people I see back to back in the chat. Amy plus Donna equals BFFs. I'll do that. All right. So how I would do this would be to find like a general baseline, but you know that it's going to come down right here. It comes up right here. You want to kind of keep it there. So I could go Amy and then make it smaller right here. But I want to then reach it back up. Amy. Okay. Plus, okay, this is too big, but that's okay. I'll just say Amy plus Donna, and then I'll make BFF somewhere else. And then Donna's going to be a little bit smaller.
Donna's like, aw.
But basically, I mean, that it's the same idea. The point is, and we would probably bring this up. The point is what you're doing is you are working within the space that you have, and that's all, and treating each letter as its own instead of worrying how it's going to look. It's a little weird, I know, but that's okay. My examples aren't always perfect. You're my new BF today.
Yeah, I'm feeling the love in the community.
You guys, this is beautiful. This beautiful blossoming. I'm a really good matchmaker. So when it comes to friendships, if you ever want to join into lives, you get to know each other. You get to know each other. All right. So more words.
That's a ginormous flask, by the way. What are you drinking? Coffee?
No, I drink tea, but I drink a ton of it. And I drink this size probably, I think I have about 7 of these a day. It's ridiculous. I love tea. And I drink it until 8 p.m. That's my cutoff.
I really want a tea now.
But I drink them out of travel mugs because it holds more. Like the ones you put in the car. Okay, we'll do 5 more words. And then, Chloe has a really good question. My name ends with 2 vowels. Would you keep them both smaller or break the rules? 100% break the rules. The smaller rule, the vowel being smaller, is a rule that we're breaking anyway. So there are a couple ways. Like I would just do what looks best to you. So if I have my guides again and I go, Chloe, I would probably keep the O smaller and then make the E a little bit larger just because it's going to balance it out. But that E looked a little too much like my L. But I'm kind of pretending actually that my X height is more, it's a little bit lower because you can see that these don't go up that high. And so, and these are pretty short. But anyway, just to give you a visual, but that's probably what I would do. If you take away the guides, you can see that the O is smaller. But if you did want to do it where they're both small, it's not going to look bad. But it doesn't look as balanced. Okay, it is going to look bad. I don't like that. Let's go bigger. And you guys, this is a really good question. So some words, like let's say a word that ends with E. I'm going to do this on it. I'm going to do this on its own layer so I don't have to keep doing this and making you guys watch. Okay. Some words that end with an E, you might be like, okay, well, you want to anchor, you want to make things look balanced, blah, blah, blah. Should I do the E small or should I make it larger so that things look balanced? This is where I like to break the rules because I actually like the end E to kind of trail off in something like this. I just think it looks pretty. Also, this little swash right here creates its own balance because, I mean, you could do something like this. That's going to create balance because it's making it so that it's not just some wimpy E at the end. So let's see a word that you guys have said. Cafe. See, I mean, it balances out. It's all good, especially if you add that pretty end and swash.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay, a few more words and then we can totally dive into questions. I can't believe how fast time goes by. It's so annoying. Okay, words that are common. Let's do words that are common that you might do a lot when you're not the words that you do when you're practicing, but words that you might want to actually put somewhere and take somewhere. Like let's say wedding is one that is used a lot in lettering. So if I come down and I bounce, you guys, when I'm hovering right here, please like when it's so close, please consider this actually baseline. I have a really hard time reaching my lines for some reason when I'm lettering. I always kind of stay just leave it inside. So just pretend. My E is smaller. I have my D. I don't know if that's just so I can see my letters better or what. But if I do this, then I will break it down. Okay. So I'm breaking this down. My D's that repeat, I ended up not really making them super different. I do bounce and have the descending stem drop below. This next one drops below. It's not quite as, in the same spot. It doesn't have to be. I actually think it looks better when it's not, but overall the shape is the same. This is the same. My I is smaller. My N totally obeys the rules. And then my G is just a little bit smaller, but I have this descending stem that anchors below. So wedding is good. Real quick about wedding, something that can be really fun is if you were to, and we're not doing this, maybe next time we'll go into swashes and flourishes and all that. But one of my favorite things to do with repeating letters like D or G is to have a swash that comes down, a flourish, because that's going to really break it up. And then it's really pretty. Let's do that next, Tom. Let's do a swashy flourishy one. Okay, I'll do happy. Somebody asked for happy. Why? There. So happy, I'm going to drop below, smaller vowel, have my P. I do P's extravagantly. You don't have to, you can do them normally. So P is one, repeating letters are the ones that I do like, why? I do like to break the rules and kind of bring them up higher sometimes, but I feel like because the previous one is anchored, it doesn't matter. So learn the rules to break the rules, but that's how I like to do happy. It's also one of those words that comes up over and over and over in my personal practice for some reason. It's also a great word to letter. Love, I mean, duh, we're all going to write the word love. So, all the ways to do this. You can have one of these pretty V's that comes through and is really soft, but then you can come through and have one that's a little bit sharper. It just kind of has its own fun interest, but you can see that I have my anchor point here. I don't have an anchor here other than here, so that is not technically the rule. Let's do that where we actually have drop and then there. So that's more of the anchor, but you get what I'm saying there.
I feel like there's certain words that lend themselves better to bounce calligraphy, like love and happy and wedding. Like if you tried writing income tax,
let's go
it wouldn't
there.
really have.
Sam, real quick, learn the rules to break the rules. As much as I wish that was mine, that's actually Picasso. So I have to say that because I'm going to feel bad. I love Picasso. And so I would be doing him a disservice if I didn't mention.
Talented guy.
Picasso. Okay. Income tax, that's going to be our last word. Okay. Right, and then cool. I'm going to get to questions. Whenever there's a vowel first, I either like to make it the normal size, or if I want to make it smaller, I always include an anchoring swash. That's just my own rule, but it will help you enjoy. I'm just laughing at Amy. It'll help you enjoy the overall result more. Okay, so I will talk about this after. Income. So we have our anchor points here. Okay, we have our bounce here, a little bounce on the C, definitely a bounce on the M, and then our vowels are smaller. See, Tom, I told you there's rules. You just have, you got to be repetitive so that they make sense. Okay, so another one, you guys don't see my guidelines, but basically I have a little bounce on the A, but for the most part, I'm anchored at baseline. I have my bounce drop and my drop here. So look at how pretty income tax looks like. I've never seen it look so good. Right? Mm-hmm. You can make everything look really, really pretty with a little. I think you need to rebrand for the government. People might be more inclined to. Can you imagine? Not hate income tax. Let's give it up for Peggy in the chat, because that was an incredible session. Loads of rules actually that I just didn't think about, or I wasn't aware. And so I've taken a few notes, but like the mini vowels, genius. Right? Yeah, hadn't thought about that. I don't think I invented it, but I did that one day. I'm going to take credit because in my mind, it was my discovery. But yeah, you guys, I promise it's going to help you. Yeah, super, super useful. So, hey, well done. That was so cool. Thank you. Loved it as ever. And the community really, really enjoyed it. So we appreciate you. Thank you. All the mushy stuff. I'll stop now. Peggy, I will catch up with you really soon. I know we have a call booked soon, but we have linked up your website and all your platforms. Again, everyone, please go support Peggy. She's awesome. And you can get those incredible freebies as well via her website. But Peggy, I will catch you really soon. Thank you again. Hey, and we can't wait to have you back in the future. Take care. Bye. Bye.